If you're watching this, you're probably trying to figure out how to cover your patio, and you've already realized the internet is full of conflicting information, prices that don't match reality. I've been in the outdoor structures business for years. I've seen every one of these options installed. I've seen what holds up, what doesn't. So I'm gonna walk you through every major patio cover option that exists right now, give you real pricing, not manufactured cherry-picked numbers, and tell you what nobody puts in their product page. No sales pitch, just the information so you can make a smart decision with your money. Now let's start at the bottom of the price range, and that's shade sails. These are the triangular or rectangular fabric panels you've probably seen on Pinterest. They look great in photos. Now for the real cost, you can buy a shade sail on Amazon for as little as 30 bucks. A decent quality residential one runs usually around $100 to $400 for the sail itself. But here's where people, I think, get a little tripped up. The sail is the cheap part. If you don't have existing anchor points like a solid pergola beam or a masonry wall, you need steel posts set in concrete footings. Once you add the posts, the hardware, the professional installation, the footers themselves, for just the installation alone, you could be looking at somewhere around $2,000 to $2,500, and that's just a basic setup for one single sail because of all the footers involved. If you actually want it to look architectural, overlapping sails, engineering posts, proper tensioning, professional installations commonly run $7,000 to $12,000. And that is usually more like commercial builds. So keep that in mind. Now, the part that no one tells you, shade sails usually have a lifespan of about 5 to 10 years on the fabric in a best case scenario, and that's mild climate. Here in the Midwest with our freeze-thaw cycles, wind and snow, you're probably looking at the lower end of that. Most manufacturers recommend that you take them down for the winter, which means every fall you're up on a ladder having to unclip hardware, and usually every spring you're repositioning everything, you're retensioning everything. They also can't go over a grill or any cooking area. The heat will grease and destroy the fabric. The big one is that nobody mentions is the fact that they can't handle rain. A light drizzle runs off of it if you've got the right angle, but a real rain coming right through at the fabric, typically after that waterproof, coating wears away, is just gonna end up coming through because it's woven to be breathable. You're spending money on something that gives you shade about 6 months out of the year, but not a huge amount of rain protection at all. And if you're here in the Midwest, that shade portion of it is really dependent on where you live and how much wind you have. The second option is a retractable awning, and we used to sell a lot of these back when we were contractors. That's really the next step up. You mount these on the side of your house to extend out over a patio or a deck. They're limited in size, usually maxing out about 14 feet 6 inches. I've seen a couple that are closer to 15 feet. The real cost is that a manual hand crank model runs about $800 to $3,000 as the base model, and then you again have to pay for installation, which could be anywhere between $600 to $1,500 these days. Now, manual ones are fine, but I used to tell people when I sold these that you need to keep in mind when you make it manual, a lot of the manual ones I used to see, people just didn't use that often because it was a pain to crank it out and then crank it back in. Particularly the larger they got, the harder it was to crank them. Not to mention you have to store the crank rod somewhere. It's not the most exciting thing in the world. And so a motorized one is what most people typically buy. Now the motorized ones are gonna be a little bit more expensive, usually adding about $1,000 to the base price. Now I'd highly recommend you don't buy an awning from somewhere like Wayfair or Amazon because those awnings typically are gonna break down very quickly in any high wind scenarios. They're built for a price point and they're designed not really to handle that much lateral load. And these awnings are essentially a sail, like a boat sail, out next to your house. So proper installation into the studs or the rim joist or whatever, and making sure you don't have it out in high wind loads and making sure you buy it from a quality manufacturer are all critical that you get right on an awning. Now, obviously, if you buy from somewhere like that, just keep in mind you need to pull it in anytime there's heavy wind loads. You'll start to notice because it'll start to bounce up and down. Typically a high quality awning in the general size most people buy, which is usually about a 14-foot width and a 12 to 14 foot, span out. On the high end, you have crazy manufacturers selling close to like $8,000 for that awning. I've seen them typically somewhere around the $5,500 to $6,000 mark, plus installation on top of that for modern today's prices. Sunsetter is very popular out there, and they definitely build an awning for a price point. But typically when you buy those other manufacturers like Sonesta or Rainier or Eclipse or KE Durasol, all those awning manufacturers are gonna usually have a little bit of a higher wind load capacity, which you want because you're gonna wanna use it in higher wind loads. So just keep that in mind. Installation is also something you definitely need to figure out, whether or not that's provided by the dealer, or if you're buying from somewhere like Costco, you're gonna need to figure out someone who can install it for you. And they do need to make sure they install it properly. If you're on fiber cement, they need to cut out the fiber cement. I have a whole video that we're gonna shoot as a companion video to this that we'll probably upload next week. I'll link it up above once it's uploaded. That'll go through all the caveats you really need to consider when you're gonna buy one of these, and that'll give you more information if you're interested into what things you really need to be wary of if you're gonna buy something like an awning. Now, what nobody tells you about an awning is that the motor is kind of the weak point. When it works, it's great. When it fails, at some point, it might. You're looking at a repair bill that could be somewhere between $300 to over $1,000, depending on the brand and whether or not the parts are still available. Most of these motors are made by a company named Somfy, almost across the entire industry, but you still have to take sometimes the awning down. A lot of times you have to tie it back and actually take the roller tube or the motor out of the roller tube and place it back in. You have to set the limits again. You have to potentially retension it. It adds a lot of extra complexity when you have to swap out the motor. The other thing you need to know is the fabric's gonna last typically, best case around 10 years before it starts mildewing, just because it's gonna want to hold on to moisture. The thing about retractable awnings that drive me crazy is the fact that they're engineered to retract in wind if you get a wind sensor, or you just need to make sure you pull it in high wind. And that's because they're just not designed for high wind loads. 25 mile an hour, and you're probably gonna start to notice the fact that it's bouncing up and down. You get anywhere near 30, and you're gonna be probably pretty concerned about having it out at the moment. Particularly the problem you have with is gusts, because the wind pressure changes and that causes it to want to bounce a lot more. You'll start to be nervous. If it's not installed properly, you may have an issue there. And then obviously it's just not fun. Like, you don't wanna sit out there with a bouncing awning over your head. So typically the thing with awnings is they're great on those pleasant days when you want sun coverage and you don't have a whole lot of wind. For me here in Indiana, given the fact that we're on mostly old corn and bean fields and we have these big drainage easements behind us, we get a whole lot of wind in the backyard of most of these houses. An awning is usually not the best option, but for the price, if you're looking at sun coverage, it is pretty much as good as it gets for the price. Now I'm gonna skip over umbrellas because that's a whole other side topic. We can go through in a separate video talking about different umbrellas you could buy and what the benefits and drawbacks are to umbrellas. If you wanna see that video, you can subscribe down below. We'll talk about that probably in a later video. The third option for just patio covers in general would just be a standard wood pergola. They're really popular. They've been around since the Romans, so people obviously know what they look like. We're getting really into permanent structures here. Wood pergolas are great because they look incredible. There's a reason every home magazine features some sort of basic traditional pergola. So for the real cost, pressure treated pine is the entry point. And that's usually around $25 to $35 per square foot installed. And that puts a 12 by 12 somewhere around the range of $3,000 to $5,000. Cedar, which is what most people want the look to look like, and the natural rot resistance, runs usually $35 to $40 per square foot, and that depends on the trim details that you put in there and how much extra little custom stuff you include. So 12 by 12 is usually somewhere between $4,000 to $7,000 installed, depending on who you have install it as well. I've seen a lot of direct consumer cedar pergolas be a little bit more expensive than that, and your local contractor might be a bit more as well. If you want redwood, you're looking at $40 to $55 per square foot. So you're taking a 12 by 12 and pushing the $6,000 to $8,000 range. Again, a lot of this depends on your local contractor for installation. If you don't have any footers, if you need to take out portions of your slab, if you have custom trim details you want included, all that stuff obviously plays into it. What no one really tells you though is that what you pay on day one isn't really the end price that you pay over the life of the structure. A wood pergola in Indiana needs to be either stained or sealed every year, in my opinion. You could do every 2 years in theory, but usually that's a few $100s a pop if you do it yourself, $500 to $1,000 if you hire it out. Over 15 years, you've potentially spent as much on maintenance as you did on the original pergola. And that's if you want it to look good for the duration. The sun is gonna wash it out so quickly that I do highly recommend you stain it about every year. Otherwise, it's gonna start getting that gray look of wood that's been sitting out and not stained in a long period of time. The reality of wood in Midwest climate is that our freeze-thaw cycle, pressure-treated pine will start to show cracks and warping within 3 to 5 years. Cedar holds up better, but even cedar develops cracks and splits over time. I've seen beautiful cedar pergolas that looked rough after about 7 to 8 years because a homeowner just didn't keep up with the sealing schedule. It's also really important that you consider those posts eventually will rot out. So if you put them in the dirt and then you have the concrete below those, that bugs will get in it and they'll want to eat up all of that cedar. So do keep all of this in mind if you're considering a wood pergola. The other thing is that a traditional wood pergola is open rafters. So it gives you partial shade at best, but you're getting rained on. The amount of times I used to go out to see people in their home and what they wanted was to take their modern pergola and cover it, you're gonna have to put some sort of canopy or polycarbonate panel or grow vines, which will give some coverage. Or what I saw most common was metal roof, like a corrugated metal roof just smacked on top of the pergola, which in my opinion ruins the aesthetic. So just keep in mind, while it looks really nice, the practical implications of a standard traditional pergola is that maintenance is high and rain is still gonna get through. And so over the life of the pergola, most people would prefer to use an actual roof. Option number 4 is a vinyl pergola. Now, a vinyl pergola is marketed as the low maintenance alternative to wood. And that's slightly true on paper. You don't have to stain, you don't have to seal them. But the real cost is that vinyl runs about $10 to $30 per square foot for materials alone. And the installed cost typically lands similar to slightly below that of cedar, roughly $3,000 to $7,000 for a standard 12 by 12. So you do end up spending almost the same amount as cedar, you just lose a little bit of that maintenance on the basic pergola. But what no one tells you is that vinyl ends up actually getting loaded with treated pine in order to do the clear spans. Vinyl in and of itself over long spans bends and bows. So you do have to load everything with wood in order to give it any sort of structural rigidity. It also makes it impossible, depending on what you mounted inside of it in terms of the wood, to actually mount anything to the pergola. If you want to mount, hanging plant, you can't mount it to just the vinyl because the vinyl is like that thick and it's just plastic. So it could pull right through. You can't mount, swings obviously to it. You're gonna have the downside of any water that gets trapped inside that vinyl to want to try and, attack that treated pine. Now the treated portion is gonna help a lot, but you still don't want a waterlogged piece of pine inside of your pergola. You're gonna have issues with the fact that the pergola wants to mildew, so it wants to develop any sort of greenness on the edges and around the entire structure. So if you get something that's white, it looks great, but just keep in mind that it will want to sag, it'll want to crack, the vinyl will age in UV, and so it's going to basically, it'll start to develop those cracks and those fissures in certain areas. So all of this is really important to keep in mind. The vinyl also expands and contracts in both directions in high heat, and so it's important to keep in mind that if you put too many screws in it, it will oil can. UV causes chalking and fading, and so some owners have reported yellowing or brittleness in as little as 4 years. And that is not only just an aesthetic issue, but a structural issue. Now, vinyl is not as strong as wood or aluminum. It flexes under load, and a heavy snow load, it will absolutely want to flex and sag. So a vinyl pergola can sag or even crack. Whereas, obviously you don't get that with a full aluminum, steel, or wood structure. So usually they're reinforced with aluminum or steel or wood to compensate for that lack of rigidity. And so keep in mind that the vinyl is just like the exterior skin. And as I said, the issue there is that it's going to end up aging relatively fast, particularly if you're in a high UV environment like a coastal area, or if you're near salt water. Do keep in mind that the sun is going to destroy that thing pretty quick. So definitely keep in mind who you're buying it from in terms of manufacturer. There are different plastic blends that are a little bit more UV resistant, but in general, that white pergola is gonna age relatively fast compared to the other option. Option number 5 is a solid patio cover. So if you want full weather protection, rain, sun, snow, everything, a solid patio cover is the traditional answer. It's essentially extending your roof line over your patio. The real cost is a basic aluminum solid roof covers usually around $20 to $50 per square foot, and then you have the installation on top of that. So they get pretty expensive. So that's roughly, somewhere around $5,000 to $12,000. These days, I think I typically see them closer to the, $20,000 range for a properly built aluminum structure. It also depends on if you get a gabled roof versus a flat roof. That depends on your current roof line, what you're tying back into. If you're getting a gable roof and it ties in halfway up your house, for example, if you have a house where you're attaching a gable and you have a pitch this steep, when you attach that gable and you want it this high up, you have to remove all these shingles on this roof line and obviously do something with them. Then on each gable, instead of a flat roof where you're paying for the roof itself, this is our louvered, instead of just paying for the roof itself on a flat roof, on a gable, you're paying for both sides of that roof. So you have extra square footage you obviously have to pay for as well. Whereas gables are, very aesthetically pleasing, they are much more expensive than their standard aluminum alternative. So if you're gonna buy a patio cover, keep in mind an aluminum patio cover is gonna be obviously less expensive. Aluminum patio covers are aluminum, and foam on the inside, and then sometimes OSB. For a wood roof structure, which is what most people like the look of, you have obviously shingles, you have all the drainage you need to put in, any ice and water shield, you have your ridge itself. You need to make sure if it's insulated that you have it vented. Highly recommend if you get a wood roof, you insulate it. Otherwise, those shingles are black, they're gonna get a bunch of heat and they're gonna radiate that heat down on you if you don't have any insulation to keep that heat from transferring down to the people that are below it. So all these again are caveats that we'll explain in a secondary video, but essentially if you're looking for a structure that's a permanent roof, that's an addition to your house, you can do that. Just keep in mind that there are some things you need to consider, and the cost, like for a wood gabled roof coming out from a house, I used to look at those were usually somewhere between $20,000 to $30,000 for a typical square footage people wanted to cover. They're not cheap. So do keep that in mind when you're gonna go out to buy one. And again, that depends on the contractor you buy from and what sort of thing you want dressing the bottom side of the roof. A lot of different small things you can add cost for. The other thing people don't tell you about a solid roof option is the fact that because you have a solid structure over any windows, you're gonna lose that light coming back in the house. Even if you do a gable with a window in the front, you're gonna lose a lot of the light that you otherwise would have gotten back into that sliding door or the windows nearby. So if it's an extension of your kitchen or your living room and you have these big windows, keep in mind you're gonna limit some of that light back into that main room. That's one of the major downsides of all solid roof options, even gabled roof options with one of those big gable glasses, is that you're gonna lose a lot of that light back into the house. So you do need to consider that as well. The sixth option is obviously my favorite. I mean, we're biased, and that is a motorized roof system, also called a louvered pergola. And I obviously know this the best because my dad and I designed our product. We originally got into these because we realized solid roofs weren't the right use for everyone and retractable awnings weren't the right use for everyone. And because we saw it was really popular and really helpful, we decided to design our own. Now I'll be extra careful here though to give you straight numbers and hopefully let you decide. A motorized louvered pergola or motorized roof system has aluminum blades, also called louvers, that rotate open for sunlight and to allow airflow, or close tight to allow full rain and shade protection. You control it with a remote or an app, or in some cases voice control. The real cost, and this is where the range gets wide, there are manual louvered systems you can buy even at Costco that you crank the blades open and shut by hand. They usually start, even on the low end, around $3,000. You're usually gonna lose a lot of height, no customizability, and you're not gonna get big spans. And whether or not it's gonna hold up to your specific snow or wind load is gonna be debatable. When you start getting into the commercial grade louvered options, you're looking at places that usually sell through dealers like Structure, Apollo, Equinox, Azenco. Those are the options that are more commercial grade, or obviously us here at the Luxury Pergola. Usually those are gonna sell through a dealer who's going to install it for you. There are direct consumer options that cut out the whole dealer model. The only one that I'm aware of that is true commercial grade would be ours. All of the other ones that I have seen are typically gonna be thinning out the sidewalls and gonna be looking at different finishing options that aren't quite the same quality level as some of those higher grade commercial models that I already mentioned of those other brands. But those DIY models like ours, essentially ours, is gonna be less expensive than going through a dealer. You just have to find a contractor to install it. The big differentiator with motorized aluminum louvered systems is because they are aluminum, there's a lot of price built in the material you're using versus just the installation itself. So usually louvered systems for 12 by 12 on the commercial end, the true commercial end, are gonna be closer to the $30,000 range installed, sometimes between 25 to 35. If you buy from us, for example, you're gonna be closer to the 20 range. But again, it depends on obviously who you're looking at. So I would definitely consider that. You can find more videos about our product and how we compare to some of our competitors as well. We try to be very honest about what good things we have versus what good things other competitors have. But the best thing about these is you don't lose that light that we talked about with solid roofs. You can open them up, let that light back into the house for the most part, with the exception of obviously the thickness of the louver itself. Usually you lose about 20% of the light that would otherwise come back into the house by being able to open up the system, but you still can close it and have all that rain coverage. So you get some of the aesthetic benefits of a pergola or a solid roof, but you have the adjustability that you would have seen with something like a retractable awning, where you can let that patio still operate like it isn't fully covered. However, obviously it is fully covered, so you still get that feeling of being underneath something, which I think makes something feel more like, makes my patio, at least at my house, feel more like a room rather than like an uncovered space. And I think it makes it a lot easier to live in it. The benefit to aluminum structures like this, specifically commercial grade versions, is you can attach shades on the outside, you can attach glass walls, you can attach screen systems, you can make basically a screen porch or a sunroom essentially underneath these things, and then just open them up when you want to open them up. And so I think that gives you a lot of adjustability. The motorized shades is what most people, I feel like, really like these days. That's what's on my house. So you can drop them down and close it and you have a screen porch, or you can raise them all up, open it, and now you have basically an open, uncovered or half covered patio area like you would under a traditional pergola. So a lot of benefits from this. The downside with these sorts of systems is obviously there's a lot of people out there and there's a lot of marketing, and so you do have to sift through that a little bit. The cost is obviously high because it all is extruded, ideally extruded high grade aluminum. So you do have a lot of cost up front to be able to purchase this system. And obviously you need, because it's, you know, a really strong, sturdy system, you do need to have the footers as well for the construction. So again, figuring out what you need and how you need it is more upfront with something like this. You need to figure out what electrical you want, what heaters you want. The more you can do at the beginning, the easier it's going to be to enjoy the pergola long term. Okay, so that was a lot of content. To recap, your real costs for a 12 by 12 or 12 by 20 area. Shade sales, somewhere between, depending on installation, 500 to 5,000. They can be up to 12,000 for professional multi-sale setups. 5 to 10 year lifespan on the fabric, in the best case scenario, depending on your climate. Retractable awnings, they're usually gonna be somewhere between, on a good end, 4,000 to probably 8,000 or 10,000, depending on manual versus motorized. And usually you're gonna have about 5 to 15 year lifespan. Wood pergolas are gonna be anywhere between 3,000 to 8,000 plus ongoing maintenance every year, in my opinion, or at least 2 to 3 years, depending on the structure. They have usually about a 20-year lifespan, depending on the wood. Vinyl pergolas are usually around 3,000 to 7,000. I've seen them typically go up to 10,000 with installation, or even 12. And the lifespan is gonna depend on your location more than anything, and what sort of UV you're gonna be subjecting it to. And then obviously what sort of installation you have, what you load it with. There are a lot of variables in how long a vinyl pergola is gonna last based on where you live. If you have a lot of trees in your background, for example, those trees are gonna wanna grow things on it or litter it with things. So age depends a lot on where it's installed. For solid roof covers, you're gonna be somewhere between, in my opinion, the $8,000 to $25,000 range, really dependent on flat roof, aluminum, who you're buying from, whether or not installation's included in that. If you get a gable roof, you could be easily in the $23,000 to $35,000 range, depending on square footage. So you're not gonna save a whole lot compared to the next option for a solid roof, particularly if it's made out of wood. For motorized roof systems like ours, here you're usually gonna get 25 years plus. You could go all the way up to 50 to 70 years, depending on the quality of the extruded system and the powder coat that's on it. Now, every one of these has a time and place. The right answer depends on your budget, how you use your outdoor space, and how long you plan to be in your home. I'm not here to tell you which one to buy. I'm here to make sure that you have the real numbers so you can make a smart decision. If this was helpful, subscribe. I've got more content coming that goes more in depth for what you should look out for before you buy any one of these and actually commit to building one of them. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.